I call to order this regular meeting of the Governing Board for the Scottsdale Unified School District. It is Tuesday, October 20, 2020, and the time is 5:02 p.m. All rise, and Vice President Beckman, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll have a roll call starting on my right.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Sandy Kravitz.
Barbara Philibert. Patty Beckman.
And Allison Beckham. All board members are present, and we have a quorum. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. I have some changes to the agenda. Public comment was amended previous to COVID, and since this is our first public comment at an open meeting since that time, there will be some amendments to the written agenda to comply with our public comment policy BEDB. Public comment will be as follows. Comments on agenda, non-agenda, and consent items only will be after superintendent's comments as item number 6. Public comments for information discussion items will be after information discussion as item 8. Public comments for action items will be after the consent agenda items as number 10. Do I have any other changes to the agenda? Board members?
I would like to pull consent agenda 8K for discussion.
All right, thank you. I move to approve the agenda as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Kravitz seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We have a notification for public comment. Those wishing to address the governing board on information discussion or action items will have completed a white card before beginning the meeting. Those wishing to address the consent and non-agenda items, please have completed a blue card indicating your desire to speak and listing the item number and submit to the board secretary. Each speaker will have 3 minutes maximum to speak. We will have a digital stopwatch, and then Vice President Beckman will also be a manual timekeeper. We'll move on to students and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Menzel, would you please present?
Good afternoon, President Beckman, Beckham, Vice President Beckman, and governing board members. It's my great pleasure tonight to be able to introduce 2 noteworthy events. The first, I would like to introduce Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education, Dr. Evie Hagigat, along with the Principal of Pueblo Elementary School, Mrs. Shelley Humman. Dr. Hagigat.
I'm going to keep my mask on since both Ms. Humman and I are here together. Good afternoon, President Beckman, Vice President Beckman, governing board members, Dr. Menzel, and Gladys. Since 1983, the Arizona Educational Foundation has annually identified and honored exemplary pre-kindergarten through 12th grade public education through its A+ School of Excellence Award program. This year, SUSD Pueblo Elementary School has been named one of the Foundation's 2020 A+ schools. Yay, Pueblo. To receive the AEF A+ award, a school commits to a demanding introspective look at itself. In a lengthy written application, the school must describe its programs and practices, document its parent and community involvement, profile its principal, provide demographic data, and be able to demonstrate its commitment to excellence, equity, service, and sustain high achievement. If the application passes an initial screening process, the school receives a 2-day visit by a team of trained judges. Originally, this was to have taken place right after spring break, but we all know what happened. Instead, the A+ judges made virtual visits with Pueblo last month, visits with both classified and certified staff, students, parents, and the administration, of course. The cooperation and collaboration that is required by a school community to become an A+ school any year is difficult. Not even a pandemic could stop Pueblo this year. We are so proud of them, and I'd like to introduce Shelley Humman, our principal of Pueblo Elementary, to share some thoughts with us.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel, governing board members, Dr. Hagigat. I don't want to be remiss in saying that all of the members that worked on the application are here tonight. That includes both classified staff, certified staff, and parents, which is amazing. This week marks actually my 3rd anniversary at Pueblo, and we have been through a lot, but I could not be more proud of the effort that we did to earn this A+ distinction. We're very, very proud of what we did. I'd like to especially thank my partner, Senora Miranda, all of the classified staff, the certified staff, the students, and the parents who all participated in the process. I also want to give a special shout out to some people that helped me along the way with the process, and that would, of course, be the support of my boss, Dr. Hagigat. Thank you to Dr. Cynthia Bachna, who worked with me on the statistics that needed to be done. And last but certainly not least, thank you to my friend and colleague, Christine Bono, who helped me along the way too, having been an A+ school herself. So we are very, very honored, and this is not my honor. When people say congratulations to me at school, I say congratulations to them right back. So I do want to give a huge shout out, and I will stand for them, for my staff at Pueblo. Thank you so much.
I also want to share that Pueblo joins 5 other SUSD schools as current A+ schools of excellence, including Cherokee Laguna, Redfield Sequoia, and Tavon Elementary School. And tonight, we also want to make sure that we congratulate the staff, all Pueblo Dust Devils, but we know that many of the members of the Pueblo staff have received a coin, and we could not forget our fearless leader, Señora Hammond. Felicidades y gracias. Grab one because they're sanitized.
Gracias. Thank you so much.
¡Viva Pueblo! Thank you.
Congratulations to the entire Pueblo team, Principal Hummin, and we are so proud of your accomplishment and the well-deserved recognition. The second recognition this evening is an outstanding member of our Chaparral High School student body, and here to provide the details is SUSD Facilities Director, Mr. Dennis Rayler. Dennis. I'll get it right one of these times, Dennis.
So you guys know I don't do scripts very well, but I've been scripted, so we'll see how it goes. Good afternoon, President Beckham, Vice President Beckman, Governing Board members, Dr. Menzel, and Gladys. I am happy to share a unique celebration. Oh, those tech guys, man, they're on it. Happy to share a unique celebration with you this afternoon. It comes from Chaparral High School and has to do with a student recognizing a need among his classmates and going out and doing something positive about it. Senior Ryan Taylor, I'm glad he didn't have a complicated name, is a lot of things. He is the president of the Chaparral Student Government Organization, or STUGO. He is a longtime volunteer with Miracle League of Arizona that provides opportunities for children with disabilities to play baseball. He is involved with the Best Buddies program for special needs students at Chaparral. He has been a Boy Scout since he was in first grade at Cochise Elementary School and currently serves as senior patrol leader of his troop number 446. He is currently pursuing the rank of Eagle Scout. It is this last undertaking, but also the cumulative result of everything this young man has done to date, that particularly brings Ryan to our attention today. As you may know, to become an Eagle Scout, you must plan, create, and implement a project to benefit the local community. Ryan saw a need in the Chaparral cafeteria, which has 2 levels separated by 2 steps. 2 small steps are a pretty daunting physical structure for anyone who is in a wheelchair, for example, or who, because of an injury, is on crutches or in a boot or a cast. Ryan's Eagle Scout project? Well, he decided to build a ramp so that anyone who wishes to go from an art classroom or the gymnasium to the cafeteria does not have to exit the building and travel completely around the building's perimeter to re-enter the building at another entrance, all because of those 2 low steps that separate the 2 levels of the cafeteria. After receiving initial approval for the project late last school year from his principal, Todd Dreyfert, Ryan spent the month of July conducting research for his project and deciding what materials would work best. Red oak and pine, in case you were wondering. Construction took place in August and September in the Taylor garage. The ramp was delivered to Chaparral and installed over fall break. As you can see, it's pretty awesome. Pretty
Oh,
awesome.
wow.
It's a good-looking ramp. To see it in person, he really did a nice job. We, as in the district, still have some work to do to ensure the ramp is up to code and structurally sound. But as facilities director for all SUSD schools, actually building services director, it has been a pleasure to coordinate with Ryan on this project and see firsthand how this project of the heart, not to mention considerable STEM and construction skills, has come together for the betterment of Chaparral students and the school as a whole. So I'd like to thank Ryan, his parents too, because we know the parents are always a helpful tool in all of this, for his great, generous gift to Scottsdale schools. We've got a challenge coin that'll be in the mail to Ryan tomorrow, so he doesn't have to have Dr. Huggy got sanitized one, and in recognition of his efforts. So we thank Ryan and his family for this contribution to Chaparral High School.
I would like to express my congratulations to Ryan as well. I've had an opportunity to see the ramp when I visited Chaparral. It is indeed impressive, and appreciate his selflessness in terms of giving back to others who need, and recognizing that eliminating barriers to participation is really important. I look forward also to collaborating with Ryan on the Student Advisory Board this year. So we're very pleased and proud of his accomplishment.
Well, I'm sorry to see that Pueblo just left, but I was going to say from the governing board, and I'm sure there's plenty of Pueblo at staff watching virtually. Thank you so much for all your efforts and all you do for your students to garner that A+ honor. And just know that we were all smiling underneath our masks. I mean, it must have been kind of hard not to see those big smiles. Also want to, hopefully, Ryan Taylor and his family are watching tonight. So from the governing board, I want to say congratulations. I will mimic what you said too, that your selflessness and contribution to those who are in need, and that you are probably friends with too at Chaparral. We wish you the best in competing your Eagle Scout honor. And also, one thing I loved about it was seeing the partnership that you had with the staff, not just at Chaparral, but with also our administration in the facilities. It's nice to see. And I want other students to know that you can reach out to not just your educators at your school, but everybody at SUSD would like to partner with you. We will now be moving on to superintendent comments. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you so much. I have 3 items tonight, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions if I happen to omit something in walking through them. The first, of course, is an update on our phased-in return to learn in person. As you know, we, for the first time since March 6th, had students on all of our campuses beginning October 12th. And that was a significant milestone. And I'll say that from talking to other people within the district, it really did feel like we were back in a way that we just haven't felt since the COVID crisis began. At the same time, it's not a surprise to anyone in this room that we've also been dealing with the COVID challenge. And so as we returned back, we started hearing reports of individuals that tested positive for COVID, and specifically, in the case of Chaparral High School, we had a significant number. And so to confirm this evening, we still have only 18 confirmed cases by Maricopa County Department of Public Health. Yesterday, we had a few more reports of some positive cases. What happens when we get the report from parents? 2 things happen. One, we ask for the individual where we have a reported positive case to remain at home while they're sick. That's a preventative measure, and the health department said that's something we should do immediately. Second thing we do is the nurse contacts our friends at the Maricopa County Department of Public Health to begin their investigation to confirm the report of a positive case. We typically don't wait for that confirmation to begin developing a general letter to those who may have been in the same classroom, for example. But we do want to have confirmation of a case before we send out a quarantine letter, because that's more significant. And what we don't want to do is send out a quarantine letter to close contacts and then discover, well, that case wasn't positive. It was an antibody test and not an antigen test, for example. So we're very deliberate in the process. One of the things that happened in this first week back was that it took a little bit more time to get information. We have a lot of students on campus. We're collecting the information. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and so the communication started rolling in. The confirmation from the health department was coming in towards the end of the week, and by the time the letters got out on Friday after we had confirmed the positive cases, the exposure was earlier in the week. The confirmation letter came out later. That is something that we work to do as timely as possible, but it's still something that's done in conjunction with the health department, and we believe it's really important to get the information right when we're sending out that communication. We've had numerous conversations with the health department with respect to the definition of close contact, which is 6 feet or less for 10 minutes or more. Those minutes do not have to be consecutive. As you know, our seating arrangements, first we have assigned seating. Secondly, we've said the students need to be at least 3 feet apart. In some classrooms, they may be a little bit more than that, but we said that our expectation is that it won't be less than that. That allows us to be able to identify when there is a positive case who is within that close contact definition. Because we are in a hybrid structure of our classes, we don't have 6 periods or in a day, but we have 3 classes that students are attending for 73 minutes. Students really are in close proximity for a longer period of time. On the flip side, if we had been running a conventional schedule at this present time, we would have had double the number of students who had to quarantine, because the students would have been in 6 classes with different classmates instead of the 3 that we were in. Part of the rationale for maintaining this schedule for the first semester, not only the logistics of how do you manage it in terms of meeting the needs of our students who remained in EDL, but it's also to mitigate the risk of potential exposure. And so it was always part of our return to learn plan to step back into this process to learn how we navigate the environment with COVID positive cases. The other thing that I think is really important for the public to understand is that as of today, we still don't have any evidence outside of the athletic programs of any spread within our facility. So there's no student to student or student to staff or staff to student spread within our classrooms. The only evidence that we have of that spread was in the athletic programs, which is where we had the 2 outbreak letters. And so some people have asked the question, well, do you have evidence that people have COVID from these other activities? And the answer is yes, but we don't publicly divulge that information. But we do have evidence of activities outside of school where people were together and groups were subsequently infected with COVID. So we issued the letter to our families, urging people to take seriously the mask wearing requirement when in public, maintaining physical distancing, hand washing, and then most importantly in this case, not coming to school when sick, because we've seen some of those stories. And we want people to err on the side of caution. And so we're working to build a culture where together we have shared accountability so that we can keep our schools open, because that's really important. I would also say that one of the things that from my perspective is, as we watch students on campus, they are substantially compliant with the mask wearing requirement. They understand that that's part of what's necessary in order to have schools and to remain in person. And so we want to continue to reinforce that. County health officials have indicated that in Maricopa County, our positivity rate is at 5%, and it's growing, it's increasing. So we are seeing an increase in the number of COVID cases. And so we want to be able to do everything that we can to make sure that it's not spreading when our staff and students are at school. The other thing that I wanted to put on the table, although it's still in progress related to this, is what happens with students who are required to quarantine. So you've been in close proximity to someone who was a positive COVID case, and you're asked to stay home for 14 days, which at most is 10 school days. And so now what happens educationally? Initially, the plan was that those students would move to the enhanced distance learning second half of the day, which is a shorter period of time, 36 minutes per per class versus the 73 that they would have if they were in person. There are a number of parents who expressed concern. Both of those that are currently in EDL selected that option and accepted the reduced amount of instructional time because there might have only been a handful of students, 3, 5, depending on the class, and so you had personalized instruction from the teacher, and so that seemed like a reasonable trade-off. At least they were willing to give it a shot. Now if you have another 10 students from your class that are in EDL plus those other 3, that raises some questions and concerns. A couple of things that we've learned in the first 2 days of having students in quarantine: a number of our teachers have turned on either their cameras on their laptop, or in cases where they've had the cameras installed in the classroom, they've used those, and students have been able to participate remotely in the morning instructional experience. And I've heard good reports about the environments where that's happened. We're looking at other improvements so that we can be sure that we're addressing the needs both of those that have been quarantined in an involuntary basis for a time-limited period, as well as those that have chosen EDL, to make sure that all of our students are getting the instructional support they need. And so the first 2 days has been an opportunity for us to learn what's working and where we need to put some other supports in place to make sure that as we navigate COVID, and this is going to be for the rest of not only this semester, but next semester and potentially into the future, that our plans are in place to accommodate needs of students who are both on campus and those who have to be remote. Another thing that has surfaced and people ask about is whether or not we're participating in any testing and what we might have in place. First, the Maricopa County Department of Public Health does have a partnership with the Banner Health System so that our nurses can print out a flyer, a coupon. You have to schedule an appointment, but then you can go into any Banner urgent care and get tested if you've been exposed to COVID. There'll be no charge to the individual. Insurance is billed first, but if insurance doesn't cover, then it's picked up by other funding sources, and so there's no charge to the individual. And so that's one partnership that already exists. A second conversation that's taking place, but we haven't finalized anything yet, is a discussion with Embry Women's Health. As you know, they've had a testing location on the campus of Scottsdale Community College. That testing site is closing on October 30th, and so they've asked whether or not there might be some space available at Scottsdale Unified School District. We don't know whether or not we're going to be able to accommodate that, because we don't think we can put a drive-in testing site on a campus where we have kids coming on a regular basis, and so we've got limited options. But I do think it's important to say that we are looking at all of the available resources that we have to have testing available for our families, because I think it's important for people to know. And while as much as people with a negative test want to be able to come back, the county continues to say you can get a negative test, but if you're within that exposure window, that 2 to 14 incubation period, you could still have the virus, have tested negative. And so at the present time, a negative test doesn't permit someone to come back to school early. I continue to ask the question every time I meet with the Department of Public Health: is there any other way that we can accelerate bringing kids back if they've had exposure, if they're wearing masks in close proximity? And we'll continue to ask that, because we do know the importance of in-person instruction when students can be there. The second thing that I want to update the board on is the pilot project that we're implementing at Cheyenne with respect to full day, every day, synchronous learning, whether students are in the classroom or if they chose enhanced distance learning. They're participating all day, every day. The cameras are on. So there have been some questions about it. Well, how did this pilot project with Cheyenne come about? And so I want to spend just a few minutes talking about what happened, when it happened, and why we ultimately approved the pilot project. When the request was first made to consider allowing Cheyenne to be able to maintain a full-day schedule for everyone, whether they were EDL or in person, versus the schedule that everyone else has, my thought was it didn't make sense to do that. We can consider that for second semester. But upon further reflection, there are a couple of factors that came into play that made it an interesting pilot project. The first is that the teachers agreed to put the cameras in place. And in my mind, being able to test that idea of whether or not having the cameras in place for a full day worth of instruction, you know, kids in the classroom, kids in person, made some sense to look at in a small scale before we potentially move to large scale second semester. Secondly, Cheyenne has been synchronous the entire time since August 10th. So there's not been asynchronous learning as a part of their instructional delivery model. When their teachers and students were all virtual, they were doing the learning synchronously. And as you know, with the traditional curriculum, it's very structured in terms of the delivery. So Cheyenne represented a unique test case, but it allowed us the opportunity to take a look at how the cameras work, what works in that environment, what doesn't work, what might need to be tweaked. I asked Principal Stombris what learning they've had so far, and she shared with me there were a few challenges with respect to audio. The wireless microphones weren't connecting well with Teams and EDL, but with some creativity, they've been able to work around some of those challenges, including teachers where all of the Chromebooks are up so that the students who are participating virtually and the students in the classroom are able to talk, and you don't have to rely on remote microphone, and then the teacher can have the microphone, but the students are connecting through the devices. And so that may be instructive for when we expand to other classrooms. It also allows, with the camera that moves, as you saw in our demonstration, allows the teacher to move around the classroom. If you only have your laptop, you're stuck at your desk, and that will crimp a lot of teachers' style in terms of how they engage students in the learning process. So with the cameras that we've been installing, it allows for more natural delivery in the instructional environment. And then the other is that in this pilot project, they've allowed and been able to have students move seamlessly between EDL and in the classroom environment without missing a beat. And so, at least on the front end, we've had positive feedback from teachers, parents, and students with respect to what they've been experiencing. We'll continue to monitor that over the course of the next month and a half. I know some have said, well, why can't you do that for others more rapidly? And of course, the challenge is multiple, not singular. It includes what's going on with the scheduling. It includes installation of the cameras. It includes addressing some of the other variables building by building. But our planning process for second semester is underway. We are starting foundationally with an expectation that we will have a full 5-day-a-week schedule, K-12, as a part of that planning process. And so the governing board will get a full recommendation at our first meeting in November with respect to what that will look like, and potentially including a request for purchase of additional cameras in order to be able to make this kind of option available as we navigate the COVID crisis. The third area that people are interested in is our student enrollment and what the impact of COVID has been. And we recently crossed the 40-day ADM mark. And as I've shared with the board in an email, and we can share with the public as well, our overall enrollment is down by 3.6%. And as we look at the impact across our learning communities, in Arcadia Learning Complex, we're down 282 students, or 6% from our 40th day count last year. In Chaparral, we're down 4%, or 218 students. Coronado Learning Complex has the largest loss of students at 388, representing 13% from the prior year. Desert Mountain is down 223, the learning complex, 223 students, or 4%. And the Saguaro Learning Complex is actually up by 50, or an increase of student enrollment by 1%. So at 3.6%, and having conversations with colleagues across the valley, we're right in the ballpark with the majority. Some have experienced double-digit losses. Others are anywhere from 2 to 5%. And so while we never want to lose students, we knew that as a result of the current environment that some parents would be choosing other options. We do hope to earn their trust back and to get them back as we continue to address the challenges in front of us. But I thought it was helpful just to kind of see the data, look at it by building as well as by learning complex. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Vice President Beckman.
Is this enrollment sheet going to be, thank you for all that, by the way, I appreciate it. Is this going to be available on our website?
Yes.
Or for people to see? Sorry I didn't ask this earlier, but we got this today. I know you may not have an answer for this right now. Yavapai isn't on here, and Hohokam is, and Hohokam is down 18%. I'm not necessarily asking for an explanation. Obviously, we're in a world where there may not be one, but could you get us kind of just some thoughts on that and why that's not broken out and where we are?
Well, those are the combined numbers because they were combined last year as well, and so it was 2019 to 2020 comparison.
Okay, so we are no longer, okay, it is Hohokam and Yavapai together, okay.
Yes.
But we are keeping track of them separately still, or do you know?
I would have to confirm with Dr. Hagegon.
Yes, we still are because we don't have anything formal that has come from our meeting attorney outcomes for Emerge, and so we continue to keep numbers. I'll triple check with Dr. Bonta, but I know
Okay.
that the site, we have someone specific to work with that.
Okay, and thank you, because I know that was our commitment to the community, that we would still keep track of the two schools as separate schools. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Dr. Lorenzo, I think people can ask questions about your comments, but you need to be careful of the system comments and not an item.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought this was the first time that we've opened it up. So, should we go ahead and take comments?
I think that's fine, just board getting into a discussion.
Discussion
Right,
about
like
it, so we'll
yeah.
just have a comment and then,
Comment.
perfect, thank you. Board Member Kravitz?
So when you say comment, does that mean no question or just?
No, it's fine.
Okay, but we don't all.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to be careful before I go down that path.
Information discussion item.
Do we know where those families that we have lost, where they went and why? Are we getting that information? And again, not to have a long discussion, but if we could be provided that information.
We don't, although we did conduct a survey, and at some point with either the first or second meeting in November, I'll share the data that we have at this point.
Thank you.
And I will just do a follow-up. Do we know where on the website, since the website is very broad, a lot of times to find something? Is it?
I will have to take a look and see where it makes sense to put it, and hopefully it'll be one of those.
Maybe
We-
have it as a
we
header for a
actually-
week or two?
Right.
And then,
Easy to
and then we'll
find,
say where
yeah.
it is. All right.
We do currently have a link with that's updated all the time with our numbers on our website.
No, we just try to make sure that this is
Yeah.
front page for a little bit of time so
Okay.
people can
Right.
easily find it.
Great, thank you. All right. After our after superintendent comments, we do have our public comment on agenda and non-agenda and consent items only. Gladys, have you received any blue cards? We have no cards, so we will not be having public comment. Thank you. We'll move on to the information discussion item. It's discussion item A, M&O override, capital override, and bond fiscal year 2020 report. Dr. Menzel, do you have any comments, and would you please introduce our presenter?
Well, tonight I'm
Present.
excited to present, we have three presenters for the override and bond presentation. This is required in Arizona statute. And Tyler Moore, Acting Director of Finance, will be leading the presentation along with Michelle Irvin and Dennis Rayler. Tyler, thank you very much.
Thank you. We also have some virtual presenters too that will be joining us. So, good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Menzel. My name is Tyler Moore, the Acting Director of Finance, and I will be presenting the annual override presentation this evening. The purpose of this presentation is pursuant to ARS 15481 and 15491, which states school districts are to hold public meeting each year to share an update on the programs and/or capital improvements financed through the voter-approved overrides and bond. SUSD currently has all three, maintenance and operations override, a district additional assistance override, or commonly referred to as a capital override, and a bond authorization. Throughout this presentation, I'll provide a high-level summary of the fiscal year 2020 expenditures, as well as touch on the fiscal year 2021 budgets and each of these voter-approved overrides in the bond. I'll also invite up a few departments who are highly impacted by these overrides to showcase how these funds have enhanced their ability to provide SUSD with resources needed to maintain and enhance the education in SUSD. So first up is the M&O override. This is the most recent override. It was just approved last year. The voter-approved authorization is 5 years, so it would be set to expire fiscal year 24-25 if we do not renew. A large majority of the spending in the M&O override is in salaries, and in fiscal year 2020, a majority of the spending went to reducing class sizes and providing opportunities for students to deepen their understanding of fine arts, athletics, and extracurricular activities. Taking a look at the budgeted column in fiscal year 2021, we see much of the same emphasis on reducing class size and supporting extracurricular activities. If you note the increase in budget in FY21 to the $20,800,000, that is due in part to the formula and is not additional money that we carry over. All right, the district additional assistance override, or the capital override, was voter approved in 2016. This is a 7-year authorization, so it'll be set to expire in fiscal year 23-24 if we do not choose to renew. The capital override has helped alleviate the heavily cut state capital budget, or the DAW, as we commonly refer to, over the past several years. And these preceding slides will show how we leverage these voter-approved funds to furnish and equip the district schools. So high level, this slide provides a summary of our capital override. On the left column, you'll see the voter-approved categories in which we were required to spend from. And then if you move over a column to the 2020 actual, you'll notice the expenditures in which we actually occurred in fiscal year 2020. I'm not going to touch on each one of these, as the preceding slides will kind of go into more detail. In fiscal year 2021, you'll see some asterisks. These indicate, as you can note on the bottom, the rollover funds that we've incurred since the voter approved capital override was authorized in 2016. We have not fully expended the $8.5 million every single year. And so those funds have continued to roll over and then added to those same category budgets. So that's why you'll see an increased budgeted amount, but that does not mean we have an increased authorization amount. All right, I would like to introduce Debbie Spalding, our Chief Systems Officer, to showcase her 2020 capital override expenditures.
Thanks, Tyler. So last year, we spent approximately $1.7 million on software and licensing. And there's all sorts of different types of licensing we purchased, such as management type software, such as Visions, which controls our accounting, finance, human resources, absences, all sorts of different management type processes. We also have substitute management software, Synergy for managing student information, spam filtering, single sign-on that everyone uses, and also our time clock software. Then we have some software that's more student-focused, such as Adobe Creative Cloud, Florida Virtual Schools, the online learning platform, School City, Naviance, and Discovery Ed for science. And then this year we also added a couple new communications softwares for communicating with the community, and those would be Let's Talk and Thought Exchange. We also, next slide, have capital override projects that we've done over the last year, and the highlights of those would be the network equipment replacements. So as of this last year, we replaced all the network equipment across the district. We've upgraded our local area networks to 10 gigs. So part of them, you'll see that there's an agenda item today to finish the last few sites. And then we also finished already our WAN upgrade. So we have 10 gigs from our network operations center out to each school. We also upgraded the phone systems. When I first started here, we had 17 separate phone systems that didn't interact with each other. And now we're on one centralized system. We also implemented one-to-one student devices, and we purchased administrative support computers. So those are the main highlights. And then I have just, next slide, a couple before and after pictures. So this next slide is a picture of one of our main distribution frame areas at the site. And so on the left is the equipment the way it used to look, and now it's all, like I would say, pretty. It's all organized and properly cabled. And then the next slide just shows another picture of that. So we made big strides in our network capability and capacities, which is helping us tremendously now that we have people learning from at home and also from on campus. So that was a really big win that we had already done these upgrades. And now I'd like to introduce Barb Reinert, and she is our, I'm sorry, I lost my sticky. Barb is our science coach, and she's going to give you her proper title. I'm so sorry. But Barb is going to talk about the science program.
I'm the academic science coach, pre-K-12. Science has benefited greatly from the capital override. And everything we've done for purchase and updates has been to help our children master the new science standards. So in elementary, we've been able to add 37 new science kits. Next slide. We have upgraded 542 science kits. And what this has allowed us to do is to make our science more accessible to all of our students, including our special ed kits. We're delivering more hands-on, more science literacy and engineering. Next slide. In middle school, we've been able to purchase 45 new kits and upgrade the existing 45, and we've also extended our online license with CPUP. Again, we've been able to increase the three-dimensional teaching and learning, the use of phenomena, and the science literacy for our science program. Next slide. And in high school, we've been able to extend the Gizmos license. Gizmos is an interactive simulation, not just for science, but also for math. And we've also been able to open this up to our special ed teachers so that they can use varying degrees of complexity for their special ed students. And as you can appreciate, during COVID, having this for high school has been really an important tool that we've used. And I'd like to now turn this over to Diane Murphy, the academic coach for elementary ELA.
Thank you, Barb. Third grade students and teachers benefited from the capital override this past year when CKLA, Core Knowledge Language Arts Skills Strand, was added to our district curriculum. The Skills Strand teaches reading using systematic and explicit phonics instruction as the primary tool for decoding written English. Third grade CKLA is set up by units, with most related to science and social studies. Teachers and students received resources including teacher editions and individual student readers for each unit. Training for teachers occurred last fall and winter, with implementation beginning in January of 2020. I'd now like to introduce Michelle Irvin, Fine Arts Coordinator.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak today, and thank you so much for your support of the Fine Arts program in Scottsdale. So, sorry, I'll say that again. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and thank you so much for the support of the Fine Arts program. Being my first year in the job last year, I had the wonderful ability to work with Dennis Rayler and Debbie and Tyler Moore, who really supported me on this. There are two main areas that we use the Fine Arts Capital, and we have the District Fine Arts Capital, and then we have Site-Based Fine Arts Capital. And you'll see in the orange, that is the district allocation, and in the blue and gray are the site allocations. So each site is given an amount of money for them to share amongst their fine arts department to choose smaller items that might help them with their students. And then the orange section is where I take care of the more larger scale items. Go to the next slide. So for instance, we bought the Coronado uniforms. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture because they have not had a chance to perform in them yet. Right now we're doing chaparrals, but those uniforms only last so long, so this account allows you to do that. Also, there's a picture of the Desert Mountain dance class, and their IB program requires them to have curtains for all of their submissions. Prior to this, they were dancing in the theater black box, which has a concrete floor, which causes damage for the children. So through this budget, we were able to create a safe place for those students to do their submissions. Another few things, we were able to replace the grand piano at Desert Mountain in coordination with the choral department and the principal at Desert Mountain. There was a very large donation from a family member, and the Desert Mountain principal chipped in, and then we were able to make that fine level of that dream, plus work a great deal with Steinway to make that happen. And then the other picture is at Coronado High School. Their black box had no stage for them to do any performances, and so we were able to get a stage for them to use. A few other things, we bought drum lines for our high school marching bands, no pictures because of what's happening. Art portfolios for all of the art teachers to transport artwork to and from events. Computers, all the computers that were in the photo labs are old and was not able to be upgraded. So I've done Arcadia and Saguaro, and then this year I hope to work on Chaparral. We're doing auditorium repairs. We did a big evaluation, and Dennis Rayler in Building Services did a lot of the rigging and curtains, but we're doing sound repairs and light repairs to make the spaces safe and workable for the students. Also, instrument purchases. So as the instruments become old, we replace it. I did work on Apache, which is where we're storing the instruments right now. And we have working instruments so that if a student's instrument breaks, they're able to have a new instrument sent to them in a couple days while we have their other instrument repaired. So it creates a nice process for us to always have the students playing and never be without instruments. We also have a sheet music library, and they're given an allotment so they can purchase any sheet music that they would like to perform for their students. And so we make that available to them. So, and then, of course, little items like I found out Kiva didn't have a smart TV to work with the students, so we purchased a portable smart TV for them to use. So those are a few of the items we have. I'd now like to bring Gail Oper in from the lead librarian.
Thank you. The library budget is divided into 3 parts: individual school budgets, a database budget, and an innovative budget. On this slide, our teacher librarians came together to find innovative products to use with our students. The students pictured are enjoying a virtual reality trip with the purchase of Google Expedition. In the other picture is the Lego Spike Kit. These kits have easy-to-use software for coding language, which engages students through playful learning activities to think critically and solve complex problems regardless of their learning level. Next slide, please. Each school has their own budget to purchase books for their learners. On this slide, you can see the beautiful displays of new books created by our teacher librarian. We have created amazing collections of books and ebooks for our students that appeal to all interests and levels at all our schools. For our elementary students, we have invested in interactive ebooks through Capstone. Students and teachers now have access to hundreds of multi-use ebooks. For our middle and high school students, we now have an overdrive product called Sora. Students can now access ebooks from anywhere. Our databases cover all subject areas. We purchase for all the schools BrainPop and BrainPop Junior for our, well, not all, for our K-8 students. Learning is made visible through tools that challenge students to reflect and make connections. For our K-2 students, we have BookFlix, which is another ebook solution. This database pairs informational text with a fiction book on many topics. Also includes a variety of activities to go with each topic. TrueFlix is for our 3 through 6 students. This database has social studies and science related books and activities. And lastly, we purchased for our little ones too, our K-3 students, Pedago. It's packed with informational articles, ready-made activities, and literacy support for students of all abilities. It boosts engagement and fosters independent learning in core subject areas. Thank you. And next up is Tyler Moore, the Acting Director of Finance.
All right, to finish up the capital override, each school also has a FF&E and athletics budget. I think originally the capital budgets were held at the district office. We have since pushed that to the schools on an ADM basis and allowed them to really utilize those monies as they see fit. So we just have one quick example. Arcadia recently purchased a wrestling mat, which has helped enhance their the wrestling program. And then lastly, we have there's one last bullet on the capital override that includes playground equipment. The playground equipment budget is managed by Greg Skelton, a member of Dennis's team, and he's done an excellent job at managing that budget. As you can see here, on the left is a before of the Sequoia playground, and then on the right, it actually looks like a playground. Here's another before and after. And so that wraps up the capital override. So lastly, we do have a voter-approved bond. The bond was approved in 2016 for $229 million. Just a quick bond summary. The bond, this slide provides a little more context. So we have the 3 voter-approved categories in each of the amounts that were voter-approved. In 2020, Dennis did a lot of work. He was very busy. He managed to spend $34 million, with the majority coming from that first category there in school construction. In 2021, we have a budget of $53 million, but on this next slide, you'll see how that budget is quickly absorbed. This slide presents, each board member should be familiar with this slide. They get this in their monthly financials. This is as of August 31st. What I want to direct your attention to is just the expenditures in FY21 and the encumbrances in FY21. So if you notice that previous $53 million budget in fiscal year 21 was as of 7/1. But as we rolled over all those continuing projects, Cherokee, Hohokam, you can see the budget is pretty much almost entirely encumbered, with a small amount of expenditures to date and $971,000, and the majority of the budget is being encumbered with $47 million. That leaves a cash balance of $6 million currently, which brings up the question soon that we'll need to at least have a discussion on that last bond sale. You can see at the bottom of this page, we have earmarked estimated 2021 sale of $73 million, which is the remaining amount of the bond authorization. So that would put a cap on the $229 million, at least in cash, and then we would have 3 fiscal years to spend that money. So with that, I would like to introduce a man that needs no introduction, Mr. Dennis Railer.
Thank you, Tyler. So I'm just going to hijack the rest of the presentation. I didn't do a bond update because I would be repeating myself from this one. Cherokee right now, and again, we're reporting for fiscal year 20 that ended in June. Cherokee is moving along nicely. Some of the board members, Dr. Menzel, have been through Cherokee with me that has opened up the 300 and 400 building, essentially all of the classroom buildings. And I don't hear much negative feedback about that school. They really, really love their new space. The 100 building, which makes up the administration building and the cafeteria building, and then cafeteria and PE. The 100 building is, 100 building, I'm looking at this picture, seeing what's done and what's not done. The 100 building is the administration, special ed, and some auxiliary classrooms. The 200 building is the PE space and the cafeteria. Both are expected to come online in January, and that will give us the opportunity to start tearing down the rest of the buildings and building the parking lot. We're actually going to be meeting in the coming days with Chief Winger of Town of Paradise Valley and Mr. Chandler to talk about traffic congestion, because we know we're going to create it when we demo that last set of buildings and finish up the parking lot. Navajo has been on everyone's hearts for a couple of years now, and so I thought I'd stroll you down memory lane because a lion's share of the dollars spent were spent last year. We ended up finishing up that restoration at $6.1 million. And unfortunately, I never got to the campus when the kids were showing up. So I don't know how they reacted to that. I've heard a lot of positive comments, but it's always nice when you fix up a building or build a new building to see the reaction on the kids' faces. They did a lot of work, literally gutted the 3 classroom wing buildings, rebuilt it. The pictures on the right show the old reception area. It used to have an accordion door that opened and closed at night for security. Then we added windows and a much more secure lobby. Pictures on the left there show that new front office and lobby area. The classrooms are light and bright and can't be beat. During the process of the renovation, we created a collab space in each wing so that they can further enhance their STEM or STEAM program. Then Coronado's roof, solar, and exterior paint. The roof was a big deal. It was leaking like a sieve. Amy and I were great friends for a better part of a year. Every time it rained, we put on a new roof, and it didn't rain at all this year. So we must have done a good job. All the solar came off the roof. We put it on structures. Now they have some great shade in both their north and south parking lots. And all said and done with the warranty, we came out in really, really good shape. Saved almost $2 million on that project because the manufacturer came back with the warranty and took care of that roof. Oh, and the paint job should be mentioned. That's just a fantastic looking school now. We're really proud of how that turned out. Had a great contractor and they did a good job for us. So HOHOCOM, the Save the Have was the term that was adopted. And so you see there the 6 buildings that were saved. There were 2 additional buildings that are on the north end that did get demolished. And the old music building that was a portable building that wasn't in great shape to begin with, that was removed. So down the center core, let's see if I can point at it, down here, you'll see buildings coming out of the ground. If you go there right now, the cafeteria, administration, PE space, that's all coming out of the ground. This week, they started bringing the stem walls up. So you'll see that as part of the architectural design, we saved the tongue and groove that was in the buildings. It's going to be just a fantastic space to not only to look at, but to teach in, because we've retained those larger size classrooms in this building. This building is slated for a June completion, the entire campus all at once, and we'll be moving in July for HOHOCOM to come home in August, starting next year. The Desert Mountain, this was a big project, cost a lot of money, wasn't terribly attractive because it was all up in the ceilings. The Y strainers, controllers, energy management system were all replaced at Desert Mountain. Very complex project. We actually had contractors bow out of bidding this job because it was so complex in such a short time frame. Pueblo Mechanical did that work, and they did a real nice job for us. Arcadia High School, the 4th track and field project that we did, came in at $1.8 million, and we think we got an excellent product on this one. The manufacturer provided warranty for this one as well because it was a field turf product that didn't last as long as they had planned, and so we got a pretty good deal on this field. And it was a complete track replacement, field replacement, and now we're planning for Desert Mountain for this summer. So that'll be coming to you after the first of the year, or at least to some of you. So that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. I'd ask the board, do we have any questions? I'll remind you, and I'll thank you at this time to Tyler Moore, Dennis Rayler, Michelle Irwin, Barb Reinhardt, Diane Murphy, and Gail, I hope I get your last name right, was it Oberlin?
Over. Gail, over.
Ober, okay, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions? Vice President Beckman.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Dennis. The capital override summary, if you could pull it up.
Sorry. Yes.
So just to explain or make sense to me of your rollovers here, I'm not quite understanding your asterisks as they're rolling over funds from 18, 19, for instance, in your fine arts and athletics, the library
Yeah.
asterisks at 1.2. So I understand the pamphlet budget. I understand your actual, which are your expenses, and I understand what you're projecting for 21, which would include your rollover, but I don't walk me through these asterisks.
Sure, yeah,
and-
what's missing here is a lot of things. So like, we have actual expenditures, but you can't see 2020 actual budget.
The
So-
18 would have started
Yeah.
with the rollover balance there. that
Yeah,
moved
you
in.
would see the budget at higher, at a budget amount that's higher than what the pamphlet amount says. And so coincidentally, the expenditures would then reflect that higher budget. So yeah, the asterisks, I asterisked 2020 because in fiscal year 18-19, the rollover from 17-18 was higher. And so it's just a compounding effect, so to speak, since
Right.
2016, yeah.
And I understand that. I just didn't quite understand where that, because the asterisk down here implies that the one would be the rollover from 18-19. Are you saying, but you have it on an actual kind of expenditure line there for?
Yeah, yeah, and I can see how that can be confusing because, yeah, what you don't see is the 2020 budget, which is where that asterisk should be
Okay, so you're
indicated.
saying that included the rollover from 18 right there?
Yeah.
Because I understand your 21 budget's going to include your rollover from the previous years, right? Plus your pamphlet budget amount, so you have more.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And I can ask you this later, we can walk through the budget.
I can give you a document. This is just a summary that meets the requirements per statute of showing our 2020 expenditures and our 2021 budget.
Okay.
Yeah, I can make sense of these numbers in a more detailed.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. I mean, I don't
Okay.
mean to dig in the weeds here, but I just would be curious what our rollovers started at and what we carried forward.
Since 2016?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can certainly
Because
do
I know
that.
we're coming up to the end of this, right?
Close, fiscal year 2024. So yeah, I mean, the conversation to renew the capital override should be starting here in the next fiscal year, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Board Member Kravitz.
Oh, I have a question about the elementary science kits.
I hope Barbara's still on the line.
Is she still on the line? Sorry.
I am.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so we've upgraded 542 kits, and 347 were circulated, and that's more than in the past, which is great. So, but can you explain what happened with the difference of the 195 kits? Were they sitting on a shelf? So, I mean, I have my suspicions about why others weren't circulated, and it may have to do with what was going on in our world, but.
Actually, those ones, the 300 that had went around 2.5 times.
Okay.
All of them went out. It's just that group actually went out 2.5 more times.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying that when I reread this. Okay, 347, okay. Thank you.
Yes. We've actually been sending out more science kits for elementary than we ever have in the history of our district.
Okay, so all of them, there were none sitting in a warehouse, they were all, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Board Member Goldberg.
Thank you. Real quick question. Can you remind me which overrides decline in the last few years? I think there's at least one, right?
That's the M&O override.
That's the M&O.
If we don't
Okay.
renew, then there's, I believe, 2 preceding years in which it declines, 2 or 3.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but
And
we
that's
did
the
renew
only
that.
one.
We did renew that in 2019. So we have 5 fiscal years from, or 5 years from 2019 on the renewal of full funding for that.
Of full funding. So the other overrides stay complete until.
They stay, yeah, they
Okay.
stay at the voter approved amount for that whole authorization. So the capital override, for example, 7 fiscal years at 8.5 million.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Tyler, I do have one question, and you can get back to me if you need to, or to the board. On the maintenance operation override summary, this one right here. Yes. So you used 2 terms. You said lower the class size, which means actually in that year, we lowered class size because in 2020-21, it says maintain current class size. So I was trying to look at how many teachers that we added and where we added them. I'm not expecting you to give that to me right now, but if you could provide that for us, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I can certainly get with Shannon
Okay.
and Jed and get back to you.
And then, can you explain the term, if you come down and kind of a little bit lower of the middle, provide competitive teacher pay? Could you explain what that is that we spend $3 million on?
That is straight from the voter-approved authorization. So for that instance, it would be part of the teacher salary increases. So that line item in particular that we would use.
Well, so if you could find out for me, because this isn't the override, but we received in our regular M&O the additional 20%. So we didn't have to use override money to be able to increase our teacher pay to the 20%.
What this is probably doing, we did get the 5% from the state, but that only identifies certain teacher groups. So this amount was more than likely, and I can get back to you, was more than likely used to pick up the difference between the guidance counselors. Those other groups that weren't captured
Right.
in that state.
Okay. It said teacher, so that's why I was curious. So, all right.
Yeah.
So yes, if you could get back to us, that would be wonderful on that too. Let's see if I had any other. Nope, I don't. Does anybody else have any other questions? I had the same one Sandy did, so I'm glad to see that those science. Vice President Beckman.
So we are projecting the same amount, if not a little bit more, in staff PD this year. So for 2021, is that still the case, given where we are and the scheduling and whatnot? Are we still able to stay on track with that and what we had done last year?
Yeah, well,
This is Shannon. Would you like me to jump in?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So on the professional development with the M&O override, it actually encompasses a couple of things. Part of that falls into there's 5 additional days that teachers are brought in on the contracts for professional development. In addition, it also encompasses, we do a horizontal pay movement for teachers when they've increased their, when they've received additional college credits, which bumps them up horizontally with their hours that they have. So part of that professional development is classes, but part of that is also that when we passed that override originally and put this in, that it added 5 additional days to the teacher contract.
Dr. Menzel, do you want to speak to that? How are we, and I guess I don't know, my question then would be, we just had some days that we had allotted or a day that we didn't do PD, right? Or how are we making that up again?
So that's something that as we were building the schedule for a second semester that we'll take into consideration to make sure that we've accounted for all the days and time that we're required to have.
Okay, so that was the reason for my question, is that the dollar amount is the same, but we've been a little bit flexible with when we can do it. So I just wanted to make sure that this dollar amount was still accurate, given the flexibility that we're kind of working with. Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to follow up with that. And Shannon, if you could just provide us, because you mentioned something I wasn't aware of, that horizontal pay. is included in that staff professional development category. So if you could provide us later on, after this meeting, how much of that 2 million is used for horizontal pay? I'd be interested. Thank you.
Sure, I can get that information.
Okay. Board Member Kravitz?
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment that I wanted to check with Ms. Irvin before I spoke, but because I thought I heard her say that the grand piano that Desert Mountain High School has is a Steinway piano. And in my previous life, I have done public relations for Steinway Piano. And I had the opportunity to see how a Steinway grand piano is made by hand at their factory in Queens, New York. And it is very exciting to me to see that we have, or to learn that we have an instrument of this caliber for our students and teachers at our school, because they don't need they don't need any more publicity or advertisements, but that we have an instrument such as this at Desert Mountain High School is very exciting. Thank you.
And also to thank everybody who contributed to that, because with quality, it's not an inexpensive item. So thank you to everybody who also contributed beyond just the override. Any other questions? Board Member Greenberg.
Sorry, just so I can, for clarification, was the question you asked Board Vice President Beckman why the budget number is 2 million?
No, it was that it's essentially the same as last year's professional development budget, but we were in different circumstances last year and didn't have this flexibility, or aren't expecting to have this flexibility in scheduling because of the COVID environment that we're in. So I was just curious if it was genuine to anticipate the same amount of expense for PD, even though we have it in their contract, given that we just had a PD day that we had to reschedule essentially for a later date.
So you're asking whether the actual will meet the budget number?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Dr. Guerin can add some on the professional development schedule as well.
Thank you, and I've asked Ms. Redner to jump in with any clarification, but the actual half-days, I'm sorry, they're not half-days, they're early release days. The early release days actually do not cost us funding because the teachers are already on contract. We do spend some funds on professional development services, but it doesn't cost us additional staffing or staffing funds because it is during the contract day. The 5 days before school are full-day professional development. Some of those days are professional development days, and we have to pay teachers to be here, and the kids aren't back yet, so that's how the staffing is working there. Ms. Redner, do you have any clarification beyond that?
No, that makes sense. Good evening. No, that makes sense. And I can speak offline as well about this.
Board Member Burlberg?
If everyone's in. Okay. All right, quick question on the maintenance and operations override, mostly just for some clarity. So we have the lower class size, 6.9 million. Maintain current class size ratios, 8.2 million. Can you talk about, and certainly help our board and community understand why you're going to see that increase? Obviously, we've had a decline in enrollment, and people are going to question, well, why isn't that flat? Are there pay raises for that staff included in that, or just help us understand that big jump?
I'll ask Shannon to touch on that.
I'm sorry, what line were you looking at again?
I couldn't hear very well. The difference between lower class size for maintenance and operation override 2019-2020 actual is 6.9 million. And then we have budgeted to maintain the current class size ratio is 8.2. I was just trying to understand the difference,
So
what's included in that, especially
that
considering our enrollment.
Yeah, there's two things that kind of factor in that. So when you're looking at the actuals, that's what we actually spent. We tend to budget a little bit higher because we think that all positions are going to be filled for the entire year, but we don't have all those positions filled for the whole year. In addition to that, there are the raises that that do go out to people, as well as the insurance increases, state retirement. So that's why that budgeted amount went up, is because we budgeted back in the spring, anticipating having all of those positions filled with increases and the insurance. But when you're looking at the actual, it's actually what we spent. We don't, as you guys know, we typically carry over quite a bit, and so we just don't fill all positions. So that's why you can see that actual and budgeting. Does that help?
No, yeah, to me, that brings clarity. It's kind of what I expected. I just didn't know, or I guess to fully understand, it really, even the actual from 2019, 2020, actually represents as a group of educators and staff that were hired. I mean, I guess I don't want to oversimplify it too much, but it is an increase in teaching staff, obviously not our whole staff, and then you're budgeting for the future to maintain that group, that block of staff. Is that, and that's what those numbers reflect?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the wording difference is because literally the pamphlet changed how we worded it for this new override. But it's really a matter of what did we really spend versus an estimate of what we could spend.
Right. And ultimately, yes, as the years go on, to maintain that group of staff requires additional dollars as raises have to be considered. And, okay, that's clear. Thank you.
And that's one of the reasons why I asked that I'd like to get a breakdown of exactly where that $7 million went, what complexes or sites and everything.
You just kind of touched on my question/comment. So this 8.2 is not only kind of the number, salaries plus Benny's grown, obviously, that we're current, but does this incorporate to what we have had to provide with regard to our staffing, because we've maintained this, these educational paths during COVID, meaning, the social distancing that we're trying to do, et cetera. I know we've had to bring in some new teachers and hire a few more here or there. So this
does not take into consideration any COVID increases that we may have incurred to hire new teachers, substitutes, et cetera. This is strictly to maintain what we had in 2020. Yep, and moving forward. And like you mentioned, like the increased dollar amount is for increased raises. And then again, in 2019, the pamphlet did change slightly. So some of the bullet points, as you see, were removed, and some of the budget columns were increased in certain categories. So,
okay. So as Barbara asked and you pointed out, it's the contracted employees we had in the spring brought forth with benefits and horizontal movement, et cetera, and your projection for that staff.
Correct.
Okay. So we can look I'd like to see those numbers too, because we will have this and potentially some additional for the environment we're in, right?
Yes. Yeah, and those are two different budget groups. I mean, one's coming from the grant.
Staff and staff, though.
Yeah, they're both staff,
Right.
but one's coming from the ESSER grant that we're receiving from the state, and then one is coming from our override, so.
Right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? All right, we'll move on, and thank you very much to everybody who participated in that discussion. We appreciate it. We actually now go on to number 8, which is public comment on information discussion items. Gladys, do we have any weight cards? We have no public comment tonight there. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
You mean as amended?
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
So moved.
Okay, was removed. Board Member Greenberg moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice President Beckman seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I hear you. Motion carries 5-0. Now we will have public comment on action items. Gladys, do we have any white cards for action items? No cards, so we don't have any. So under action items, we'll now first go to the consent item that was pulled, and that's consent item K. And that is the approval of supplemental insurance benefits for cabinet-level administrators and executive directors. And Jan Michael, you pulled it, so if you'd like to explain your reasoning, and
Yeah.
we'll start a discussion.
It's really just about two things, clarification and one request. Just to clarify, as written, we are saying that the insurance benefits will be paid through for both cabinet level administrators and executive directors through December 31st, 2020, and not just for cabinet level administrators through December 31st, 2020, and then for executive directors for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
That's correct. It would, for everyone, and
For everyone.
December, at that level, December 30th, 31st of 2020.
Okay, I appreciate that. The request I have is that I believe that the review done was only on one specific set of benefits. I would like to just make sure that we review all of the benefits that our administrative staff and executive team staff are receiving, and that those are in line with what we have approved and what is written in their contracts. Just because if I'm not mistaken, this was a narrow review. And maybe Michelle, it looks like Michelle has a comment.
Board Member Greenberg, I was going to say that I believe that was done, but I will confirm that and follow up with the whole board.
Perfect. It doesn't necessarily need to be on a meeting, just an email letting
Sure.
us know. Thank you very
I'll
much. I
confirm
appreciate
that.
it.
Thank you.
All right, that is it. Sorry.
No, any other questions or clarifications? All right. Then we will vote. Do we have a motion to approve consent item K?
So moved.
Board Member Greenberg moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Perlberg seconds. All in
No,
favor?
no, that was it.
Oh, I thought you both said aye,
Sorry.
and I picked. Oh, it was you. Okay. I guess I should be looking up, shouldn't I? So, Vice President, no, Board Member Kravitz, we'll give it to you. Seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion all opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Then we'll move on to our action items. Move on to action item A, Superintendent's Performance-Based Pay Plan. Dr. Menzel, would you like to introduce this request?
So as required by Arizona State Statute 15341, 39, and Section 3D of my contract, by the end of October, we have to set a performance pay-based plan. As you know, in the first year of a superintendency and in our current environment where metrics are a little bit more challenging to come by, the proposed plan is not what I would envision that we would see on a go-forward basis, where we'd be able to put more emphasis on improved academic achievement with specific measurables. But the plan is designed to identify and weight that as the most important objective for the superintendent, to be focusing on improving educational outcomes for our students. Additionally, the other items that are identified here as part of the proposal is really designed to look at how do we engage the community in long-range planning, how do we elevate that conversation, how do we ensure that we're evaluating our leadership team in an appropriate manner so that we're all moving in the same direction towards the number one goal, which is improving outcomes for students. The last piece really then focuses on elevating the voice of our students. They are the reason that we exist. And so what I attempted to do in putting this together is to combine the core elements of the three primary performance goals that you've established for me this year, and to connect those in some meaningful way with the performance-based pay plan in statute.
Thank you very much. Do we have any discussion? Just so the community does know that we have all been in discussion individually with Dr. Menzel regarding this proposal. Does everybody understand number one, and next spring, when you review it, you'll know what to expect? Just want to make sure. The others are pretty straightforward. All right, then.
Sorry.
Board Member Greenberg.
For number 4, for the evaluations and prior, and the evaluation tool will be shared with the board by 12/31. Oh, you know what? Never mind. That's fine. Thank you. Ignore me.
It'll most likely be before the 18th, since we'll be on winter break.
Correct. Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
We did discuss it. Oh, all right, well, I move that we approve action item A as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And thank you for your work on this. Action item B, pupil transportation school bus purchase. Mr. Wagner, is he here virtually?
He's here in person, so you have the proposal. As you recall, there is money set aside in the bond proposal for purchase of buses, and recommendations in front of you, and Mr. Wagner is here to answer any questions you have about the proposal.
All right. Do we have any discussion regarding the proposal? Board Member Kravitz.
So on the front of this page, it says the purchase of 5 Type D 84-passenger rear-engine school buses. On the back page, it says 15 school buses on the flip side. So is it 5 or 15?
Mr. Wagner?
Good evening. I didn't read that, but it's actually 5 Type D and then 10 Type A.
Oh.
So 15 altogether, and that might have been.
Okay, sorry.
Well,
because this is.
I'm sorry, that was from last year. No, it's 5.
Okay.
That was I think what, it's 5, we're waiting for delivery of the 15. It's 5 Type Ds. I'm not sure where you're seeing 15.
On the flip side of the page, where we have the action item.
If you go to the large packet that we received.
So it says on the second page of the memo, item requested, it says 15 school buses, trade-in value included in final price quotes, and then it lists the summary pricing. That should be 5 and not 15.
Yeah.
I will say the online one, I think, only says 5.
Okay, well, okay, well,
Very good clarification.
I was
Yeah,
concerned because this is what's going on. Okay. And then, I believe, I read through the presentation kind of quickly, so please bear with me, and I apologize. I believe in what we were emailed, there was a mention of purchasing, instead of 84 passenger buses, 77 passenger buses instead.
Well, there was some.
Is that correct? And why, I get it, it's only 7 kids, but why one versus the other? And then my other concern is, what is the delivery date of these buses?
Well, the delivery date, the projected delivery date, if we get a purchase order to the vendor within the next few weeks, would be prior to June 30th of 2020.
So it would not be for this school year. So my next
Correct.
question then goes to, we've kind of danced around this through several superintendents now, of changing our schedules for start times for our schools, and perhaps return to a 3 start time schedule, which we veered away from several years ago. It's my understanding if we went back to a 3 start time where we had elementary, and this is just, again, we haven't discussed this, but elementary, high school, and middle school, then we would need fewer buses. I thought I heard, and correct me if any of my colleagues recall, that we would need 8 fewer buses. So I guess my question is, if there will be some discussion in the future, and we don't know when that will be because we are in COVID, but hopefully it will be sometime within the next school year, is now the right time to buy more school buses if we are changing the schedule and we'll need fewer school buses? And that's a question for my colleagues, and if you have.
Well, my recommendation, and that's due to some of the questions, I try to anticipate and respond to some of them in what I had sent to Dr. Menzel. And that's why I offered the 77-passenger alternative, because it's less expensive upfront costs, and it's certainly less expensive to maintain over the course of time. One of the concerns that I have, if we don't continue the purchase plan that we set forth in 2018 as part of a board presentation, I did an analysis of the fleet, and we made a determination of where we were. We have about 56 school buses that were purchased in the year of 2005 and went into service at various points during that year. I don't want to get to a point where we're going to be purchasing a large number of school buses at one time, because then you have brake jobs all at the same time, exhaust, et cetera. So I think that it's prudent for us to continue to purchase based upon the plan that was presented in 2018. Now, there's only 2 years left after this purchase, and it's a limited number of buses. But right now, I've got about 7 2005 school buses. One of them is going to require a new engine at $23,000. I don't think that's a prudent purchase or repair. And I've got another 6. I think that between the 6 of them, probably upwards of $30,000 in various types of body and other repairs. I would like to retire those vehicles, and then again, like I said, I got 56 2005 vehicles that are getting, they're going to get tired. So I think we need to continue, regardless of a potential schedule change or whatever. We need to continue to keep our fleet refreshed so that we don't run into a situation where we're going to be purchasing a large number at one point.
Any other board members? Board Member Greenberg.
Out of curiosity, when we are procuring vehicles like these school buses for our fleets, whether it's the white or the bus fleets, is environmental impact ever part of the procurement process or evaluated? I mean, do we look at electric buses? I don't even know if those exist, but do we look at those and how those? I mean, I do know they exist. I don't know if they exist at the school bus level, but I mean, how do we? And obviously, newer buses, generally speaking, depending on with new technology improvements and how older buses break down and need more repairs and have worse fuel efficiency over time. I know that the new buses are better in that sense, but do we ever look at those alternatives and how does that work?
Yeah, I keep up on the literature and attend webinars, and now more so. And I've been to many conferences over the years where they talk about alternative fuels: propane, compressed natural gas, electric. There's all 3 manufacturers. There's actually 4 major manufacturers of electric school buses, and they're great. I mean, they're fast, they're quiet, but they're way expensive. I mean, you're talking $400,000 a bus. California, they do a lot of things different, but they're selling a lot of them in California. There is some grant monies available, but it involves infrastructure that we don't have, that we would have to invest in. I would love to go electric, but I don't see that happening. And my son is a wannabe transportation director back in Michigan. I don't think I'll see that in his lifetime or his career on a regular basis, just because of the cost.
Right.
Propane is a viable option. Gasoline is coming back into the school bus industry. But I believe, and I'm kind of an old school guy, but I believe clean diesel is the best fuel for school buses, especially in this environment. But it's a lot cleaner and than it was, and there's aftermarket stuff after exhaust stuff that goes into it. But I'm always on the lookout you know, what's in the best interest of the environment, et cetera. But, you know, we still have to balance the cost of ownership, you know, not only the upfront cost, but the cost of ownership.
Yeah, it would be interesting if you could share some of that research as you come across and
Okay.
everything with us, just because it is, I think, becoming a more important issue as time moves on. So, but I do appreciate the costs and the infrastructure for having charging stations and all that. There's a lot of changes that go into it. But I thank you for sharing your guidance.
Do you have any questions? All right, I have a couple because I'll follow up with Sandy. You asked if any of us had thought about, do we need these school buses? And I did, and I asked some questions, which may be why there was an alternative for the 77 passenger. So I was curious, it didn't say how much actually would we save? What would the cost be?
On a 77?
I mean, is it 10,000 or is it 100,000?
No, I think, you know, at one time, you would be able to purchase 2 conventionals for every, or 1.5 conventionals for every transit. That's not the case anymore. I don't know if we could eke out 6 for 5 in this case. You know, it's hard to say.
So for the same price, instead of getting 5 buses, you might be able to get 6,
Yeah, maybe, yeah, we might be able to get, we might be able to get 6. But it's a, I come from a conventional world. You know, the transit, you know, when I came to town, it was, you know, I was told, because I wanted to, you know, look at conventional, I was told the Arizona standard is 84 passenger Bluebirds, but, you know, whatever. And so I think it's something worth exploring, but it's not going to have a major impact on our fleet if we go, if we, you know, maybe we wait the next time and we get 3 conventionals or, you know, whatever. It's not going to make a big difference cost-wise. And the passenger count, we seem to put some focus on our, you know, whether we're efficient because we have, you know, we're filling up buses. That's not as big a thing as people might think.
Well,
we got a lot of ground to cover.
But I have a question on that. You know, when I drive by and I see an 84-passenger bus and I see 5 students in it, I have to believe that we could use a smaller bus and it would be more efficient. And it sounds like the smaller the bus you get, you know, obviously it's less to run because it takes less gasoline. It also might be, I think you said cost of ownership is less, so that probably is maintenance maybe is less. So there is some savings that might be there, and if we are not filling up our 84-passenger buses and we can save some money there, that is probably something I would, as a board member, would want to see. And we're not in any rush because, as you mentioned, these aren't even planning on coming in until June, so we're not using them for this year. So that is something I personally, as a board member, would like to look at. And then in light of especially what you put as a note down here, you said we are currently using 64 of our transit buses for daily routes and field trips. We have 92, but we're only using 64? So I know that you said you're maintaining 23 as spares, but somewhere else you said you only need, you kind of try to keep 10%, well, 10% of the 92 is, you know, 9 buses. So it almost seems like we have a lot of spares. So do we really need as many buses as we thought we did in 2018?
Well, we have 3 yards. We have 3 different locations. And, you know, especially with, you know, like in the early part of the school year when with the heat and everything, it's not unusual to have, you know, 3, 4 or more buses go down at any one of the yards. So
well, I guess that's my point. If we, the 3, the 4, so if you have 9 or 12, but we have 23. So those numbers just didn't seem to me to say, scream out, we need to purchase more buses. It almost seems like at 92, even though we have some that are just fair and may need some maintenance, that we don't need to replace them right away. So I just wanted to get some more information on that as well.
Well, and again, part of that is just the progression of, the money, we have X number of dollars, left over, and it was spread out, that those purchases were spread out over the course of those years. So,
Well,
if we don't issue a purchase order for these 5 buses, if we don't issue a purchase order within the next, few weeks, we won't get them before June of 2021. There's minimally, with a transit, there's a 6-month lead time in manufacture. And right now, with COVID, et cetera, it's a little bit. And I know, I just got notification that the seat manufacturers are going to be issuing a 4% increase. Steel, is going up, et cetera. So,
it's going up.
if we don't, is it an emergency? No, but I think it's a prudent course of action to stay on the path that we have prescribed.
Well, I'll go back to what Board Member Kravitz said, and it is before your time. Board Member Kravitz has been trying to get this study. Dr. Kriegard did say a study was done and that there needed to be some tweaks to it. So we are waiting for that as well. And I hope that part of that study is usage, does it reduce the amount of buses that we need if we go to that 3 schedule? So given that we do not need these right away, and I am a firm believer in not just buying something because 3 years ago or 2 years ago we were on this track, because things do change and efficiencies can change. So I personally would like to, if we could, wait until November 3rd before we approve this, or we can go ahead and vote and see what happens. But that's where I stand. Board Member Kravitz.
Also noted with the 77 passenger bus is the cost of ownership is less, so that would include the cost of fuel. I would be interested to know what the fuel savings are between running an 84 passenger bus and a 77 passenger bus. It may be minimal, it may not be, but over the course of the life of a bus, it may be substantial.
And you also mentioned it doesn't take as long to manufacture, so even if purchase order is a little bit later this year, you might get it around the same time. So I think we just possibly need information depending on how we vote. Or Vice President Beckman.
I think Board Member Greenberg will have some.
Board Member Greenberg.
Well, so just because I'm not privy to this information, is the statement that we are not filling our 84-person buses?
It was down at the bottom right here. Oh, my statement.
Yeah, sorry.
I just don't know. I just see a lot of our buses that are not full, not just right now with COVID. I'm not thinking COVID, I'm thinking pre-COVID. So we had made that. And so we have been waiting to see how full are our buses.
Is that do you think that that's an accurate assumption that our buses are not full?
Oh, yeah, we don't fill, some of them are.
Right.
Some of them are full and others are not. And it's not a function of the size of the bus, or it's really the geography. It's the time, the miles we have to travel and the time in which we have to do that.
Right.
That's really what it amounts to. If we went, which I firmly believe respectfully would be irresponsible, but if we went down to a 60-passenger configuration, that might work in many of the cases. The cost to operate a 60 versus an 84 is not significant enough. I wouldn't be comfortable making that recommendation. It's just not significant enough. The cost to operate a 77, the fuel cost for a 77 versus an 84 is not that significant. And so we have a certain amount of time to travel a certain amount of distance, and we put as many students as we can on, on our buses as possible within the time frame we have.
So the numbers might be mathematically insignificant, but they are run for 10 to 15. What's the average lifespan of one of our buses? 15 years, 16 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could understand wanting to know on a long-term scale what those savings would look like, so I can understand that.
Well, and if we know that we're most likely not going to fill an 84-passenger bus, and we have, and let's say we buy the 77, and they're going to be 100% adequate, why wouldn't we buy the 77 over the 84? I'm all for saving money,
Could
so
we-
I just look at it that way.
Potentially would
You don't need it, why buy it?
Could we schedule so that we're not taking up too much time and delaying purchase, but would it be feasible to schedule a meeting on this in the next week or two, once that information is calculated,
We could bring it back on November 3rd.
I don't know if that's too late. Because I do appreciate at the same time, we do have a plan in place specifically for purchasing these buses, because if I'm not mistaken, the entire point of the plan was that we wanted to move from a system where we bulk purchase at one time to spreading it out over time. So I'm cognizant of the logic and the purpose of the plan and the importance of it. And I don't want to delay if it means that all of a sudden we don't get the buses on time. I mean, we still have the buses we have now, but if they're breaking down at a high rate, that's problematic. So I wouldn't want to wait. That's November 3rd. That's what, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks from now? 2 weeks from now? I can't count right now. 2 weeks from now. I don't know if it's worth having one just next week, just on this specific issue.
Well, I can ask, also, thinking with COVID, we know for the next year, we're not going to be, I mean, this is not even, these buses aren't even for next year.
No,
So-
they're going to go, they won't go into the, fleet until
So we're
probably the
using
fall of the
less
following
buses
year.
Anyway, so that if any year to actually do the analysis, this may be the time to do it. Just putting that out there. Vice President
So
Bethany?
I would agree with tabling it, and the reason being is because I do appreciate that we have a ladder of bus maturity, because you don't, I'll agree with my other board members here, you don't necessarily want to have a huge expense all in one year where you have like 20 or 30 buses that are mature and now you have to replace them. But having said that, jumping off of what President Beckham said, obviously our enrollment has changed over the years and it is fluid, but there would be a case, I would think, of having kind of diversity of passenger, account numbers of those buses of what they can use, and it might be nice to have a few, but I'm a little unsure about what you said, because if it's not going to save us money at all, you might want that bigger capacity. So my statement to you is that I have more questions as it relates to and I think we can get that in 2 weeks. They're not significant questions that require some huge study or something. It's just, can you give us a reasonable expectation in the next couple of weeks that if we were to purchase buses that were a little bit smaller, is it worth doing so in the long term? Because I agree with the ladder of bus maturity. I just want to see if we can eke out any savings in this environment. We certainly want to do so.
And I can real quickly, I can answer your question that it's going to be, looks like based upon the projections, about $50,000 less to purchase. And quite frankly, I wouldn't have offered the 77 alternative if I felt that it's not going to have an adverse impact. I don't believe it will have an adverse impact on our operation. There will be learning curve issues with drivers, who've been driving the transits for all these years, but I don't believe that it would have an adverse impact. Otherwise, I wouldn't have offered it as an alternative.
Is there any cost difference in insuring a smaller bus or anything now?
No, the upfront costs are less for a conventional. Forget about the size for a minute, but the type. The transit, rear engine transit versus the conventional, front engine conventional. The cost to purchase those is less upfront. And then the cost to maintain them. The labor hours and everything are less for a conventional than they are for a transit. Although our guys have been doing transit maintenance for, for many, many years.
So when you say 50,000, are you saying 50,000 for the 5 buses?
Oh, yes, yeah, not per, but.
So that's significant.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Still, I mean,
That's just rough.
That's
I
a
mean,
lot of
But-
money that we can put somewhere
But
else.
if there is, yeah, I mean, I guess. the
Well,
question-
actually, we can't. It's only
No,
for buses.
Right,
But
but I mean,
But it can,
still money, yeah.
but is it only to purchase new buses, or can it be used for maintaining the existing
Repairs
buses?
down
I wish it were, but no,
If it's just
unfortunately, I
for new
think the way
buses.
that it was worded, it's for
New
vehicles,
buses.
pupil transportation vehicles, yeah.
But as we do know that costs are going up, that can be used. We might
But
need
is that-
those funds.
Flexible as in like student activity buses or anything else, so, I mean.
That's
I think-
my understanding,
Okay.
yes.
So other fleet issues
Correct.
could be used for, okay.
Any other questions or discussion? So I guess we have two things that we could do. We could look at approving the 84, we could look at approving the 77, or we could wait to get more information.
So I don't think we can approve the 77 because we need to
Hold on.
get bids on that, and we would need to bring that back for approval.
Okay, well, thank you. He had it down as alternative, so I thought maybe we could. All right, so why don't we go ahead and put it out there to approve the 84, and we'll see where we stand?
Should we move to table first?
Move to table if we have, I just don't know where everybody is.
I move to table action item
Okay.
B, people transportation school bus purchase to the next meeting.
All right. So we have a motion to table the item until November 3rd. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Kravitz seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Can I just make one quick request? Since we're tabling it, I would love to kind of understand, and I'm sure it's somewhere, but to understand the plan, the schedule that is laid out. Totally makes sense to buy a few at a time and be thoughtful in that manner. But for us to understand, is there that point where, feasibly, what we really do need right now to be efficient and to make sure we have enough for the students we have now, where is that stopping point where we could say, wow, maybe the next 2 cycles of purchases we don't need? I'd just like to understand that better rather than kind of saying, okay, we don't need it now, and then 2 years from now, we do need it, and of course, everything's a lot more expensive. So I just want us to understand that come
Okay.
the November meeting.
Yeah, I can get that. We've only, just so you know, that we only have about 15 more projected buses to
Okay.
purchase with the monies that are available in the bond.
Okay.
So I
All
think
right.
the more important discussion is going to be,
Yeah.
where are we going to go
Right, yeah.
after that?
The type of bus, maybe.
That makes sense,
I
yeah.
mean, what are we going to
Right.
do to buy buses after that?
Right, because we'll have to.
Because
renew.
I still have, like I said, I got 56 buses that have been on the road for 15 years.
And they are all in use, because
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to understand, too, you have kids getting to school, that's one thing, but we also have sports teams traveling, and that's maybe not where we want to skimp on a few seats, because the last thing you want to do is have to add another bus to their trip. So I guess just make sure we understand that picture as well, that it is factored in.
Yeah,
We're
it
not
is.
missing the boat here, Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Action item C, approval of general agreement and release regarding Chief Systems Officer. Dr. Menzel, Dr. Bowman, and Ms. Marshall, how would you like to proceed?
Madam President, members of the board, and Dr. Menzel, this agreement was the subject of an executive session at our previous meeting for legal advice. We've brought it back for approval, and I will take any questions you might have.
Board members, do we have any questions? Okay, Board Member Greenberg.
Is the chief systems officer the retirement is a complete retirement, right? There's no working for a few days, a week, or anything like that?
Correct.
Correct.
As of January 6th, it will be a complete retirement.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I do have something I would like to say, because I am looking at this request as a personnel issue and not a personal issue. And as I look at the request, and it's to extend additional benefits to an employee at her time of retirement, which is an additional approximately $11,000. And in return, we'll have a signed separation and release agreement. However, in our employee benefits to all of our employees in paragraph 2C, and I didn't have the actual, if it was a policy or if it's in the contract or where it was, that you just had given me. the
It was
2C.
in the administrative agreement, which is now the administrative handbook.
Okay. It shows that the amount of the general leave payout to be 50% of the general leave. And in this case, the employee is requesting to pay 100% of the general leave. So it would be approximately $22,000 or an additional $11,000. And I just want to let you know that I don't support approving additional payout of benefits because I believe it's contrary to our existing policy or the agreement that we have. The administration is, to me, has not provided a strong reason or evidence that there's a need for the additional compensation or a separation and release agreement. And as an elected officer and governing board member, I believe it's our responsibility to carry out our stewardship role. And we must adhere to the policies and protocols and practices that we have at this time. So we need to be able to review the situation and be willing to vote against an administrative recommendation if it is contrary to our policy or the agreement that we have. I also believe that this move could set a precedent and open the district to other employees requesting the same benefits. So as I had stated, I just don't, this is truly a personnel issue for me, not a personal issue, and therefore, if this policy needs to be changed, then this governing board should look at changing the policy or the agreement, not picking and choosing who gets additional compensation. So I just wanted to have my statement of why I will be opposing this particular request.
I will just say that if the board desires additional legal advice, you can vote to go into a legal advice executive session, but I do think we covered that in the executive session.
Board Member Kravitz.
I will take up that offer you've
Okay.
just made.
Okay.
You need to vote.
Yep.
Somebody needs to make a motion.
So, would you like to?
I move that we meet in executive session to discuss this agenda item.
Okay. We have a motion on the table to move to executive session for action item C. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice President Beckman seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Or actually, nay. Can I change my vote?
Yes,
Am I
you
allowed
can
to
change
do
your
that?
vote.
Nay.
Okay, so it is 4-1, because I didn't hear you say aye, but I
I
assume you
did
said
aye.
aye. Okay, it's 4-1, so we'll move into executive session.
Okay. We will need to excuse anybody who's not necessary to the executive session.
I'll be right back.
Okay. And we will adjourn the executive session. I move to adjourn the executive session. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Board Member Kravitz seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. And so we adjourned at 7:29 PM. We'll reconvene the regular meeting at 7:29 PM. We are on action item C, approval of general agreement and release regarding Chief Systems Officer. I move to approve action item C, approval of general agreement release regarding Chief System Officer. We can have a second, and then we'll add if there's any discussion in case anybody has that before we vote. Is there a second? Vice President Beckman seconds. Any discussion before we vote? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye. So motion passes 4-1. We move on to future items for consideration. Do any board members propose topics for future agenda items? Jan Michael Greenberg.
I don't know if it quite needs to be a topic for a future agenda item, but I am cognizant of the fact that we are limited to 50 people in this room, including us. And I think perhaps it might be wise to reintroduce the telephone public comments to accommodate that. I don't know if that's something we need to vote on and put on an agenda item or not, but I just want to put it out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? I have a future agenda item that had been one in the past, and I think it was one of our consent items, K brought up. I would like to bring back up that we revisit hiring an internal auditor.
Okay. Yep.
Any others? Okay. Dates for upcoming meetings. The next meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. It has been requested that it be moved to Wednesday, November 4th. And I believe all board members were able to weigh in on that. Is that correct?
Not all responded.
Oh, okay. At 5 PM. So that's kind of a request. Is anybody unable to attend on that day? Okay.
Eva would be able to.
What was that?
I believe I'll be able to.
Double check, okay. So we will have that special governing board meeting. It will also be held in the MDA, where we are right now. The regular governing board meeting will be held on November 17, 2020 at 5 PM at the MDA also. Do we have any governing board reports? Board Member Greenberg.
I have two topics. First, last week I met with families from the SUSD Full Reopening Facebook group. They're the moderators and the individuals who started it. It was about a 3-hour meeting and a very useful one. It was very nice to hear directly rather than through the screens and emails that we've received. They shared a lot of valuable input about the social emotional state of their own children and their children's friends and how important that is and that we really need to focus on that. And also the academic impact this has had on many of their students who were straight A students or very good students, but whose grades have dropped because of the difficulties in learning in this environment. I don't think that's unique. I think that we're all very aware, both at our district and other districts, about that. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated the opportunity to meet with those parents, and I believe Dr. Menzel will be meeting with a similar group of parents in the next few weeks, and I think that will be a useful discussion. The other item was that it was the ASBA Delegate Assembly on Saturday where we approved the political agenda. I actually thought, I've never attended in person, it was completely virtual. I thought ASBA did a very good job. There were almost no tech issues. We didn't have people commenting in saying, oh, I can't get this to work, I can't get this to work. It was actually a very smooth ride, so I compliment ASBA on that. There was one board member who raised a number of amendments to strike portions of the policy agenda. Those were all voted down. They included striking the policy agenda for protecting policies, as an example, protecting policies that protect our students and staff based on sexual orientation and transgender identity. So that did not pass. We had another one asking that we strike the policy against the ESA voucher expansion and STOs, the tax credits. That was also struck down. But importantly, I remember Board Member Kravitz had asked about the compulsory attendance policy. So I did ask about that, a couple questions to see whether an amendment was necessary. I first asked, would it affect students who completed GED or high school diploma or some other equivalent like the Grand Canyon diploma earlier than the age of 18 or 16? And they said no, because it's compulsory attendance, so it only applies if the student has not otherwise completed a degree or diploma of some form. I then asked whether we should require, as Board Member Kravitz had pointed out, instead advocate that students must complete that before leaving. Their position is that that's a very difficult thing to do, because we have to remember that we are dealing with students at that point who are 18 and older, so they are legal adults, and prescribing laws that would require them to stay in school beyond the age of 18 in order to complete that is impossible. Students do currently have the opportunity to stay until the age of 21. I don't know if we're all aware of that. I think we are. But that's an opportunity. They're not required to. So they believe that probably would not be constitutional to do in requiring people over the age of 18 to stay on until they complete a degree. But I did want to bring that up because that was mentioned. I think we all thought it was a really good idea, and I just want to get clarification on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice President Beckman.
I almost forgot. Last week, I had the great opportunity to make a statement before the Phoenix City Council in support of a ban or a citywide ban on flavors for e-cigarettes, et cetera. There was over 100 people there to speak, many in education in support of this type of ban. Many shared stories that were extremely heartfelt about their own experiences, et cetera. I had the good fortune to be in the queue and listen to Dr. Jesse Welsh from Paradise Valley also speak in favor of a citywide ban on the flavors. So I look forward to seeing a resolution come before us potentially on a future agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I move to adjourn this regular governing board meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Kravitz seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. This regular board meeting in November 2020 is adjourned. Oh, October. Oh my gosh, did I keep on saying November this whole time? It is adjourned at 7:36.